Action Button Reviews Cyberpunk 2077 will return after this commercial break. Starring me! I want to tell you about my favorite shirt. I've had this shirt for over 2 decades at this point. Originally printed in commemoration of the 6th annual Have-A-Tampa Shootout dirt track stock car race held in Woodstock, Georgia in 1995, this t-shirt baffles me to this day. Its graphic design speaks to me across decades. The mid-'80s hot neon Trapper Keeper geometry adorning one corner, and the early 1990s chubby chunky crayon squiggles adorning the other. The hodgepodged typefacings thrill me, and starring in this piece a 6-gunning cowboy drawn so coloring bookishly across the ages rising from the depths. It strikes me as the inscription of some ancient saintly amateur. I have treasured this shirt every moment it has existed in my possession. Yet cherish it as I do, I cannot stop myself from wearing it outdoors at least once weekly. To paraphrase the jargon of the modern streetwear connoisseur, this shirt is my holy grail. Often I have nightmared of this shirt's irreparable soiling or violence-related loss. To own this shirt is to know I will never find its like. Probably once weekly for the last 10 years, I have searched in vain for this shirt's duplicate on eBay. I know I will never find it. And it might not just be my holy grail. Full-grown men have in the past on the street screamed cash offers at me. A guy will be like,
"Yo, I will give you $20 for that shirt right now."
Even on my hungriest days, and I confess these past 20-odd years I've experienced my fair share of hungry days, I find these offers comically easy to reject. During one particularly dark period of my life, however, as I occupied myself offering good, though usually roundly ignored advice in a consultant capacity for the promised, though seldom delivered, money of technology psychopaths, I experienced many offers that shuddered my ethics. For example, once at a party I did not want to go to, a millionaire yelled at me that I was killing it and I was crushing it, and that he would give me $500 right now for that shirt. Venmo. Of course I wasn't going to give him the shirt. I bodily needed $500 from anywhere. My various capitalism tendril touch points would have eaten that $500 instantaneously. Yet I knew on the spot I would not give up the shirt. I humored him though. I said to him, "How much would the price go up if you knew that in the list of qualifiers printed on the back, there's 3 Rexes, 4 Ricks, and 5 Rickies?" To which he replied,
"Crushing it, bro,"
and reiterated that the $500 offer was serious. Again, I was not going to sell the shirt to this man. To summarize his physical appearance, all I need to say is had it been even just 6 months later, he would have offered to buy that shirt in Bitcoin. I was not going to sell the most precious item in my art collection to some rich boy. Because let's face it, you and I both know what rich boys do with an article of clothing. They wear it once, and then they feed it to daddy's paper shredder. Seriously, have you ever checked the bucket under a rich boy's daddy's paper shredder? It's all Dior, Gucci, Giorgio, Emporio.
"It's a me, Emporio."
So I told this rich guy at this party,
"Hey man,
I don't want to go home topless." To which he responded by immediately unbuttoning the top button of his shirt. He was wearing a suit, by the way, and he said to me,
"What are you, like a 42?
And I said, "Oh yeah, I'm a 42, $100 if you want this shirt." And he yelled,
"Crushing it, bro."
and then another millionaire yanked his arm away, and I went home wearing my shirt feeling pretty cool, and I didn't cry about money until I was in bed, at which point I'd already taken the shirt off. For 10 years after that, I continued to own, carry, wear, and take pride in that shirt. I endured several other offers. Highest was $1,200. Hungry as I may have been, I never sold. I kept my scruples close. And I today, right now, finally, fully understand why these 2 decades I have clung to this shirt as it has clung to me. Over long years, I have absorbed its inspiration. And I arrive at you today, right this moment, possessive of the spiritual wherewithal to productify this shirt's essence and sell it to you. Out of some kind of revengeousness against that ancient remembered rich boy, I partnered with my personal favorite t-shirt illustrator of all time, Dandy Dan D. DeSalt, to produce the perfect spiritual successor to my 1995 6th annual Habitampa Shootout Dirt Track Stock Car Race t-shirt. I have squandered the greater portion of my prime-time adult life navigating social situations as though they were superstition minefields. So I have decided to, today, for you, break with that bad tradition. Therefore, long before a trailer, long before a gameplay demo, long before any concrete details at all, allow me to present to you Truck Heck, the t-shirt. Precision formulated between Dan DeSalt, Brent Touchdown Porter, myself, and that ancient forgotten saintly amateur who scribed my 1995 6th annual Habitampa Shootout Dirt Track Stock Car Race shirt, Truck Heck the t-shirt represents the perfect spiritual successive crystallization of my personal favorite work of art of all time. The Hanes Corporation unfortunately no longer manufactures heavyweight cotton t-shirts of the exact shade of ash gray upon which those genius shirtsmiths long ago printed my treasure. So we chose this Gildan Ultra Cotton in a remarkably similar shade of ash gray, which personally in a vacuum, minus the baggage of 20 years of owning this other shirt, I would admit is probably a more attractive shade. Available now on shop.actionbutton.net. Just like my cherished favorite treasure of a shirt, Truck Heck the t-shirt also carries a design on its back. However, I will not show you that design. I want you to trust me. And if you'd like to trust me about more than one thing, why not back Action Button on patreon.com/actionbutton? Not only will you feel great and daily knowing you have contributed essentially to the creation of these videos, you might awaken one fine morning when you least expect it to find yourself the recipient of a tangible reward, the mysteriousness of which I dare not here insinuate. It's got mini HDMI. I can actually still use the AV. I do not recommend Honey Herb Ricola lozenges, though they are delicious and they make your throat feel a little bit better. If you've had a sore throat for longer than a week, you should see a doctor. I had my sore throat for like a month. I should have seen a doctor.
How much longer is this going to go on?
Thanks for nothing, Ricola. Oh. Anyway, now that that's out of the way, let's get back to Action Button Reviews Cyberpunk 2077. And now it's time for the bottom line. Cyberpunk 2077 gives us everything. Cyberpunk 2077's developers saw fit to name every mission in the game, both main story missions and side missions, after songs by famous musical artists. If your only familiarity with the details of Cyberpunk 2077 extended to seeing screenshots or watching trailers, you might presume these missions take the names of songs by punk rock bands. You might even expect missions named Killing in the Name of, Dragula, or Let the Bodies Hit the Floor, or Head Like a Hole. You'd maybe even expect such tackiness as a Marilyn Manson song reference, maybe The Dope Show. Instead, Cyberpunk 2077's missions take their names from songs by musicians in a wider variety of genres than the game's aesthetic might otherwise lead you to expect. Surely we have missions named after songs by punk bands like Ramones, The Clash, Black Flag, and Minor Threat, though Also by rock and roll legends like The Doors, The Rolling Stones, Queen, Anthrax, and Metallica by way of Ernest Hemingway by way of John Donne. Dig deeper and you'll see mission names reference songs by Joy Division, Pixies, Talking Heads, Johnny Cash, David Bowie, Nancy Sinatra, Nina Simone, The Velvet Underground, The Smiths, Blue Oyster Cult, and, for God's sake, REM. And as if it weren't tacky enough to have missions named after songs by Jimmy Buffett and The Beatles, they even have missions named after Aerosmith songs. I don't yet understand what it means that I found myself able to identify every artist as every mission title slid onto the screen. In a few minutes, however, maybe I will. If you were to assemble every song whose name Cyberpunk 2077 fairly uses for a mission title into a Spotify playlist, then click OK on that playlist at a party during which your friends felt comfortable nodding off on your sofa, and then you fired a pistol at the floor to wake your friends up all at the same time, at least 2 out of 3 of them would yell, "Where'd my pontoon boat go?" That's my way of saying the playlist would basically sound like some road trip playlist your retired uncle would play on his boat because the highway patrol impounded his car. Do you know what kind of boats uncles whose cars were impounded by the highway patrol have? I'm sure someone on the internet has assembled a playlist of every song name-checked in Cyberpunk 2077's mission menu, though to paraphrase Minor Threat, I don't want to Google it. The thought of some e-drink slamming gamer chair sitter poning noobs with the sounds of Aerosmith rocking his PewDiePie green razors makes me morose, makes me feel far away, farther away from you than I'd like to feel. Cyberpunk 2077 is a middle-aged man of a video game. Cyberpunk 2077's shotgun blast approach to its most frivolous, superficial inclusion of cultural reference provides us a perfect encapsulation of the game's joie de vivre. When we buy into a game that promises to give us everything, we sometimes forget to first ask ourselves what everything means. Everything means too much. Cyberpunk 2077 is an ultra-budget AAA single-player open-world first-person shooting role-playing action-adventure game which validates my purchasing of an $1,800 graphics card while starring Keanu Reeves. It is an Assassin's Creed Fallout from the makers of The Witcher 3, a climbingless Watch Dogs Far Cry in a city with higher population density and a much more stylistically dynamic genre veneer than any Grand Theft Auto. The shooting ain't no Destiny 2, the driving ain't no Forza Horizon 4, the first-person movement sure as heck ain't no Titanfall, though at least the part that looks kinda like Christopher Nolan's Borderlands starring fanfiction Jennifer Lopez is better than Rage 2. I enjoyed Cyberpunk 2077's rich plot, its broad network of narrative choices, its affecting characters, its hypersaturation with Keanu Reeves, the many great jackets of the NPCs, and the thrill of crowbar prying open a role-playing battle system until I could kill the final boss before he could even enter his wide-open, meticulously designed verticality-heavy arena. That I arrived at that final boss overpowered enough to perform 7 crippling 5-digit critical hits to him per second until he yelled that he was owned does not implicate the game's design as much as it simply indicates I enjoyed myself quite enough to blast through dozens of side quests before deciding to see the endings. With side quests and side characters so good, I can't imagine a twisted freak exists who would go get an ending without having finished at least 2 major side quest lines. So maybe it is the narrative designers' fault that I got to the end so overpowered. Though maybe it is the game designers' fault that I had to spend 4 minutes dismantling 200 pounds' worth of guns that I looted from the corpses of enemies I killed in a fight I was definitely not supposed to win at the climax of Act 1, resulting in Perhaps the most tonal whiplashian anticlimax I had experienced in months.
Delamain, got it!
Welcome back. Delamain, all units report opening.
Problem! You don't...
More even than that, the process of reviewing Cyberpunk 2077 has induced me to yearn to just relax and play any video game where I do not feel always compelled to loot the corpses of my dead enemies and then dismantle their weapons into parts immediately right there on the spot so that I don't have to deal with a repeated "you are carrying too many items" notification blocking the screen during an emotional cutscene. It happened so many times during my first playthrough. What lingers loudest even now is Cyberpunk 2077's apocalyptic case of hypertrinketitis. So many handfuls of up-pickable trash littered Cyberpunk 2077's vast, blasted landscape, and the game rewarded me so bountifully for dutifully picking up every last one that a freezing wave of relief washed over me during each of the ammo pickupless, free health regenerating gun battles of the game's Johnny Silverhand glory fantasy power flashbacks. Those gun battles reminded me so much less of The Matrix and John Wick and a lot more of the fake film Fake Purse Ninjas within the movie Bowfinger, starring Steve Martin and Eddie Murphy, that at the close of Act 1, during my first playthrough of Cyberpunk 2077, I got the phrase "fake purse ninjas" stuck in my head like a glitched subtitle. Fake purse ninjas. It's still there, even now. Despite the grave possibility that scrutinizing 200 hours of footage like this
See that? They're mine! Murph?
She sought it with thimbles, she sought it with care, pursued it with forks and hope.
Johnny, payload.
probably gave me literal brain damage. I enjoyed playing Cyberpunk 2077. Maybe I'll play through it again someday. Maybe when CD Projekt Red releases some hot DLC and they have fixed all of the bugs. Maybe by that point, Nvidia will have released a graphics card that can actually run the game in 8K at 60 frames per second or any frames per second. I'll launch Cyberpunk 2077 the day I install that new graphics card just to look at it and say, that's a lot of frames. Then later I'll tell my buddy about it and he'll ask me, can it run Crysis? And we'll laugh so hard because that's one of our favorite old jokes. Maybe this scene will occur on a pontoon boat. I can't get that hypothetical dad's boat playlist out of my head. The brazen, very Budweiserishness of it gives me a clammy chill. I realize I'm older now than I'm not. When I first saw Keanu Reeves in Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, he reminded me of one of my cool cousins. Now I look at him and think, he's only 15 years older than me. 15 years has become nothing to me. My dad said to me on the phone a couple of weeks ago, I can't believe I'm recommending arthritis cream to my son. Dad, I hate to break it to you. Your son is getting old. And so are video games. Cyberpunk 2077 is video games' midlife crisis. Much like an individual human's midlife crisis, it arrives after much indulgence and excess and much in a rut stuck getting. Video games have been through a divorce and a career change. And with Cyberpunk 2077, video games have leased a brand new 2021 Mazda Miata that fits them about as well as the pair of jeans I just bought fits me. I remember yearning for this game. The first time I played Grand Theft Auto 3 in 2001, I thought, if only it rained all the time in this game. If only neon glowed. If only it looked like Blade Runner. Onto this tiny whimsy, I tacked numerous qualifiers as years passed. I wanted decisions. I wanted shooting. I wanted whatever the world figured it wanted. Our elders often caution us to exercise carefulness when wishing. These elders often neglect to inflect specificity when intoning caution about such and such, so we let their platitudes bounce right off the eardrum and right back out the same ear hole it went in. And you see, just because you wish for something once and then put the wish away does not erase the wish. Others are out there ballooning your old trash wish every day. Sometimes they remake RoboCop or Total Recall, and you're like the only person you know who thinks those movies are kinda good. Sometimes they make a brand new Mad Max and it completely owns, though usually it's like they make a second Blade Runner movie after 35 years and it's pretty good, I guess. And you're like, I remember saying once that this would probably own, and I guess it's okay? Back when I originally wished for a cyberpunk-flavored role-playing Grand Theft Auto, I was 22 years old. Today, I'm 42 years old. And I could make this paragraph a lot more interesting if I delay this review by 2 years and record this part again with a slightly rewritten script. I understand I am barely, according to physiology, the same person I was when I originally considered a big, meticulous, wide-open cyberpunk action role-playing game the greatest of great ideas. If only there were a Greek mythology-related philosophical thought experiment I could. My every body cell has replaced itself several times ever since I first yearned for a game like this. So when I sit and play Cyberpunk 2077 today, concurrent with my encountering in its honey tunnel much which delights my older connoisseur's taste for cinema, I encounter elsewhere in its blast waste, for example, lightning strikes of humor that remind me of the guy in his 20s my brother hung out with that summer he, at age 16, started bagging groceries at the supermarket. That guy gave young me 2 bits of quote-unquote advice. First, that before you go to any foreign country, you should totally learn all the swear words, dude. And second, that you should never give money to a homeless person unless they have a handwritten sign clearly stating they intended to buy booze. Because you gotta respect the honesty, dude. Back then, I admit I laughed at his advice, though today, I'm different. For example, today, I know that as a linguist, the first words you should learn in the language of a country you intend to visit are in this order: I'm sorry, and thank you. Additionally, as a fan of the Count of Monte Cristo, I personally also always make sure to learn how to say the verbs wait and hope. So I played Cyberpunk 2077. I couldn't not play it. To deny myself this game today is to forget myself yesterday. We only perceive others because we remember ourselves. To forget ourselves is to forget everyone else. So I played Cyberpunk 2077. I couldn't not play it. I played it until its wheels fell off, and it had a lot of wheels. Mostly, I played it with a Judge Dredd expression on my face. The, for some reason, toddler-sized ghost of my 22-year-old self riding shotgun on my knee, frequently clapping and pointing and yelling, "That's Neo from the Matrix, Daddy!" And it took me aback and I gasped, and I knew then that I am old enough today to be my own college-age self's daddy. I enjoyed playing Cyberpunk 2077. Also, I learned nothing from playing Cyberpunk 2077. So, to answer the many people who have tweeted at me or emailed me or direct messaged me to ask if I'm going to review the game again when the developers quote-unquote fix it, absolutely not. How could I say anything else about Cyberpunk 2077 or any modern game? Furthermore, the developers cannot fix Cyberpunk 2077 without substantially refoundationalizing the core experience. Sure, a patch could fix that ridiculous feeling that smacked me 14 times in 200 hours when a cutscene demanded my character disrobe and then ended with my character utterly naked the next time I opened the menu, causing me to yell in real life that I was butthole naked in front of all those people? Maybe a series of increasingly elaborate patches could nerf perks that in their current states render the game buffoonish to eyewitness even on hard difficulty. Maybe one of these patches would finally rip from me the grimy crutch I leaned on for most of my play experience and finally force me to take not the most unsubtle approach to every combat encounter. Maybe after enough patches, Cyberpunk 2077 would finally achieve a state wherein stealth tactics actually reward the player more than once or twice per 100 hours. Though could a patch change the fleeting veneer of hopeless frivolousness whereby I refused to put on a hat because they all looked clownishly stupid, even knowing as I did that I couldn't see my character during cutscenes anyway? No amount of patches could cure Cyberpunk 2077's trinketitis. I spent 6 times as much time dismantling just looted guns for crafting components in the middle of a battle so as to reduce my inventory weight down to sprinting speed as I spent listening to Keanu Reeves speak. Not even a bodysuit made of airtight patches could contain the stain of Cyberpunk 2077's open-world aspirations. I fell into some water once in the middle of a random battle, and then spent exactly 5 minutes, 1 second, and 11 frames looking for a ladder that'd let me get out. I did not find a ladder. I had to reload a save. I have no idea how I did not turn the game off forever at that point and make a tweet announcing that the Cyberpunk 2077 review was canceled. I could have done it. I almost did it. Not even a house with patches for bricks could enshrine the fact that I started Cyberpunk 2077 so immersed as to obey traffic laws. And by less than 15 hours into my 200 hours with it, I was driving like this. No wheelbarrow full of patches could overwrite the notion that I played a game set in a huge open-world city where I did not notice until after spending 400 hours playing it for paraphernalia's video capture that the AI-controlled drivers do not know how to drive. They just stop in the middle of the highway all the time. For no reason, and I never noticed until I was scrubbing through my footage. And then after that, I played the game to just capture some clean driving shots, and I kept crashing into people who weren't driving. They just were not moving. I mean, is this a PlayStation 1 game? Talking about Driver, the original Driver has literally better traffic than that. Not an interstate highway paved with patches could lead Cyberpunk 2077 anywhere other than that proverbial and sometimes literal roadside motel parking lot, wherein I rolled grenades under so many of my own cars to blow them up so that the insipid little vehicle icon would stop cluttering my Spartan HUD during a dramatic cutscene. Not an airplane fueled by patches could fly Cyberpunk 2077 to any place other than that place wherefrom I got all the way to the end just by increasing my intelligence to half the maximum and riding out one cheap trick. Story of my life right there.
It's alright!
Jerry, someone had to play Cyberpunk 2077, so I did. Someone had to make Cyberpunk 2077, so they did. I mean, they wouldn't have had to make it if they hadn't made that huge fake 48-minute gameplay footage video. Man, I do not envy whoever had to make a real video game based on any of that. That game looked real good, man. I watched all those trailers after editing this whole review. I saved the trailers for the end, and I realized all that footage I scrubbed through, I never bounced a bullet off of a wall to hit a guy behind cover. Not once. And I saw that in that trailer and I was like,
Oh man, that owns so hard. That's such a game changer.
game changer for what? Game changer for like the era of Gears of War 2? It ain't 2008 anymore. Kyle. Let's make a Tenacious D reference. Or did I make a reference to one of the several people I know named Kyle? Thanks, Kyle. Cyberpunk 2077. What it got ain't new. And it ain't nothing you can just fix. The self-truest patch CD Projekt Red could release would be a sequel with a different number in the title. What, 2078, 2079. Remember, even CD Projekt Red couldn't make The Witcher 3 before not making The Witcher 3 twice. And no, just because The Witcher 3 had some great DLC does not mean that some great DLC will make Cyberpunk 2077 retroactively the great video game full of interesting high-stakes decisions many of us imagined when we watched that first 48-minute gameplay demo. It just doesn't work that way. Even if they make an entire DLC about the guns that bounce bullets off of walls to hit enemies behind cover, I have about 200 hours of gameplay experience that tells me I will still forget to ever use those guns even once. And I loved those guns when I saw them in that trailer. I went wild for those guns. I hooted and hollered for those guns. I am, however, quite actually genuinely excited for the DLC, and I honestly hope it continues the Mayor Jefferson Perales side quest lines plot. Those who've played that one know that's the most interesting part of the game. In other words, if Cyberpunk 2077 is CD Projekt Red's job interview, and if I'm the one in charge of the hiring, then sure, they're hired. They put in a lot of work to their application. If Cyberpunk 2077 is video games' midlife crisis, it's also mine. More than perhaps any other video game I could have chosen to exhaustively review 5 other video games in a run-up to, Cyberpunk 2077 stretched the limits of my self-worth as someone who has chosen to exhaustively review video games for a living for the foreseeable future. This admittedly stupid video game has provided me a venue of shocking depth with which to reckon the soul of internet content creation. Take, for example, V's Penthouse. Some shrewd individuals discovered that by executing multiple tricky combinations of jumps, double jumps, and cyberware technique exploits, players could scale precarious ledges, appliances, and other environmental objects within Cyberpunk 2077's main character's apartment building. Users of this technique made save states after every successful ledge grab and reloaded if they fell. Eventually, players got to the top of the building, clipped through the roof, and found themselves in this lush penthouse mansion with a beautiful rooftop lawn and a breathtaking view of the city. It has a swimming pool. Inside the penthouse mansion, players found many items and artifacts seeming to indicate that the house in fact belonged to the main character, V. For example, by the bed are fancy clothes, explicitly labeled as belonging to V. I only sought out the content of other creators for research purposes after finishing my own thorough playthroughs of Cyberpunk 2077. When I did so, I found a video called How to Find V's Secret Millionaire Mansion and Premium Outfit on a YouTube channel called Crazy Gaming. Crazy Gaming? Craze Gaming? Craze Gaming? I don't know how to pronounce it. On a channel called Crazy Gaming. The narrator of the video excitedly explained the necessary technique. Visible blips of his inventory menu revealed his character was equipped entirely in legendary gear. When at last he reached V's mansion, he fan-theorized at great length about what this magnificently elaborate interior means. Did it represent cut content?
Did it hint at future DLC?
Well, that's the billionaire mansion that you're gonna eventually probably end up with somehow? I'm not entirely sure. It's really awesome. Like, you really wish there was a way to actually purchase something like this. It would probably be super expensive though. It looks so frickin' awesome. This is one of the most gorgeous houses I've seen so far in the game. This is probably going to be tied into some story or some mission, I presume. This is it with the billionaire mansion right here. V's own billionaire mansion, of course. If I think about it, I'm pretty sure this is going to have some form of relevance. Maybe a bit later, because currently I'm on the last mission, though I didn't complete it yet because I want to do everything in the game before I finish it fully.
Given that this same guy had spent evidently a lot of time both researching Cyberpunk 2077's movement-related cheats, hacks, and exploits, and mastering the techniques necessary to enter the mansion, I might have mistook him for an industrious, homework-doing sort of person. Yet, as I sat listening to him wish and yearn to be able to spend in-game money to purchase this sweet new house, the truth boiled inside my huge guts. I knew this house was in one of the game's endings. I'd seen that ending yesterday. The whole 100-hour-long video game, plus one of its most substantial side quest lines, builds up to a lengthy, bittersweet ending involving a beautiful dawn on the skyline visible from this house. During that most happy-like of all the game's bittersweet endings, when I tried to read a sad poem by the considered untranslatable Polish poet Bolesław Leszmian, a solid golden plate shattered, perhaps attempting to warn me of the dark existential ruminations YouTube would bring about in me the following day. I scrolled down into the comments. I saw a comment with, "Do not do this," in all capital letters. The commenter explained that in the ending involving the mansion, the player is required to loot the jacket in order to proceed. Entering this mansion and looting said jacket ahead of schedule irreparably bugs that ending. And I thought, wow, how cyberpunk is that? This guy's video had 100,000 views when I first saw it, and I thought, wow, how cyberpunk is that? This guy's YouTube channel was then full of similar videos meticulously displaying delicious exploits and hacks and wild sequence breaks. In one video, he shows players how to kill Keanu Reeves' arch nemesis Adam Smasher by clipping through a wall using a mod. This video has 1 million views. That's more views than I'll probably get in a year on this ridiculously thorough, soul-wrenching review. This YouTuber here slapped together a build that's doing 30,000 damage per pistol bullet in the prologue. And here I am, proud of having found and hacked a tiny little exploit myself during my own playthrough. This guy's raking in hundreds of thousands of views per week on that good, hot game breaksmanship content. And I'm over here reciting scripts that purposely channel the meticulous prose stylings of a local politician writing a speech before losing an election in rural Victorian England. And for what? At one point, while researching this review, I found myself in a store on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. I bought a pair of pants there, a pair of pants that has William Gibson's name on it somewhere for a reason. I don't have time right now to explain. I did explain it earlier if you watched that part. One of the shop's staff mentioned that William Gibson himself shopped at that store. Joy Division was playing on the stereo. This guy said,
Yeah, William Gibson comes in here whenever he's in New York.
And I thought, that's neat. Me and William Gibson buy stuff at the same store. Wonder if he buys stuff from this store that has his name on it. Probably not. He probably buys some of the stuff in there that doesn't have his name on it. Knowing that me and William Gibson shopped at the same store humanized William Gibson, so I thought, maybe I'll try to talk to him for this review. He'd said something about Cyberpunk 2077 back when its reveal trailer came out. He said it just looked like a Cyberpunk-skinned GTA clone. He later backed down and said something like, maybe it's okay, I don't know. Well, nobody remembers him backing down and saying maybe it looks okay. Everybody remembers him just saying it looks like a Cyberpunk skinned GTA clone. So I thought I can interview him about it and maybe set the record straight, and maybe that would be interesting for somebody. So, one way or another, I got in touch with William Gibson's people. I explained that I do big, labyrinthine videos nominally about video games. I told them about how I'd referenced William Gibson's work, what I thought was quite meaningfully, in my 6-hour video about Tokimeki Memorial, a Japanese dating simulation released in 1994. Bingo! I sent the email. I figured, heck, this is worth a shot. If anybody should interview William Gibson about this particular stupid cyberpunk video game, why not the guy who's thoroughly researched political speeches of rural England circa 1844? Having sent the email, I continued to play the game. I sat exactly in the middle of scrolling down the comments sections on YouTube videos about V's secret mansion, screenshotting every comment I could find wherein a commenter phrased some vague demand that CD Projekt Red make the mansion purchasable in a patch right now. I thought about Mass Effect 3 for a second. I thought about the pontoon boat for a minute, and I thought about Pete Townsend for 30 seconds. Pete Townsend, guitarist of the English band The Who, had said in an interview in 2019 that the guitar's possibilities are literally exhausted. Having actually read the interview in question, I know he said this as high praise of today's kids shredding guitar on social media. In that same interview, he went to great lengths to say modern hip-hop is rock and roll. The guy was 74 years old, though he sure was exhibiting sublime sensibilities worthy of a TikTok. Of course, in this era where the truth is paywalled, yet the lies are free, the full text of an interview falls dead on the doormat while a soundbite flies 10,000 miles. I recall people I know personally and respect intellectually telling Pete Townsend on social media to get owned before immediately moving on with their day and addressing the next disposable topic. I remember someone cheekily quoting The Who's immortal lyric, "I hope I die before I get old," while retweeting a tweet about the interview. 1 year later, a modern and female popular musician broke a guitar on stage at, of all the dad rock blast and dives in Manhattan, Saturday Night Live. Some social media idiot had tweeted about how irresponsible it is to break a guitar, and that tweet went viral, with people owning the guy as a misogynist and uselesser than a wheelless bicycle. This guy deserved the shouting down because, come on, getting mad at a musician destroying a guitar is absolutely a boomer thing. And it was boomers who invented smashing a guitar on stage. In fact, it was Pete Townsend. So I thought, why would I ask William Gibson to say something nice, cool, fun, or even insightful about this idiotic video game? So for a few minutes, I felt very stupid and very ashamed. So many people I have personally liked within the video game industry have, during my career, left video games behind for something else. And they all seem so cool and emotionally wealthy and philosophically honest for it. And I feel like I'm sitting here in the dark, sitting next to the only light that's left on. What am I waiting for? I don't know, though I do know I'll be waiting decades right here for open world games in particular to stop always being exactly this all the time. Excellent clip plays here. Oh, that was in brackets. I wasn't supposed to read that part out loud. I usually don't leave myself notes like that in the script. I don't know why. I just was really, really proud of the clip that I have. I guess I should play the clip. Start it right here, right here.
Do your thing. I'll watch.
Okay.
Wham bam
Gotta be the
shalala.
past then. All right, let's go.
Guess we really are. Well done.
So, did I interview William Gibson? Maybe I did. Was I going to say no to the invitation to a private conversation with William Gibson? Maybe I wasn't. However, I don't need to share it with you because I know that I do not need to implicate William Gibson in a review of Cyberpunk 2077 any more than I'd need to bother James Elroy in a review of LA Noire. At the end of the day, Cyberpunk 2077 is a genuinely good video game if you just put on your big person lower body garment and get over the elements of it that you personally don't like. Cyberpunk 2077 can be bland at times. Its open world is often boring and its game design has more holes than a sponge. You can sleep in your bed literally 366 nights in a row without doing a single quest, though when you wake up in a junkyard at the end of the prologue, the title card still says 2077. Having said that, at least it doesn't have zombies in it. So where do we rank it on the Action Button Season 1 scoreboard? Against Pac-Man, Cyberpunk 2077 loses immediately. Pac-Man's single, horrifying glitch at level 256 stands in as an utterly perfect minimalist encapsulation of the game-breaking bug, with a poeticism with which no Cyberpunk 2077 glitch compilation video could dare compete. Against The Last of Us, Cyberpunk 2077 takes a tumble. One need only look at the sheer density of Cyberpunk 2077's main story missions to know the developers chased prestige recognition. Yet the blast waste glue between the honey tunnel exquisition clashes with bad friction. Whenever Cyberpunk 2077 tries to explain its story outside of its story, it digs another spoonful of dirt out of its own grave hole. Comparatively, The Last of Us stays razor consistent, keeping the player at work. Cyberpunk 2077 quotes Marcus Aurelius and Aristotle and the Iliad and Frankenstein and Ernest Hemingway, though The Last of Us manages to at least wind up as mechanically lean as a Hemingway sentence. On the other hand, both The Last of Us Part 2 and Cyberpunk 2077 let players kill gamers. Gotta say, that rules. Versus Doom, Cyberpunk 2077 turns immediately into bone powder. Cyberpunk 2077 unremarkably huffs the fumes of a dead aesthetic after subtracting political interest and sterilizing the hard parts. Doom, on the other hand, remains the product of developers living in the year 1993, not at all unconvinced that Cyberpunk predicted our real future. Doom is the product of John Carmack and John Romero, two guys who read cyberpunk science fiction, saw the parts about three-dimensional virtual reality cyberspace metaverses, and figured they would be the guys to get the ball rolling on that so that the world could be hooked on it by Flying Car 2035. Doom is an artifact of genuine cyberpunk expectations, and its authentic truth to itself sits perfectly out of reach of Cyberpunk 2077's stubby T-Rex arms. Versus the Final Fantasy VII Remake, Cyberpunk 2077 falls flat on its tattooed face. Perhaps the Final Fantasy VII Remake comparatively shines for its brutal authenticity to its inspirations, enabled by its inspiration being a story already told long ago, making at least the script writing process easy for its makers. Or maybe the Final Fantasy VII Remake triumphs over Cyberpunk 2077 because its gently stretched Yakuza-like structure with several recess-esque, free-roaming side-quest chapter zones perfectly suits the aims of the modern big-budget single-player game. Cyberpunk 2077's huge open world for open world's sake feels trite at this point. Or maybe the Final Fantasy VII Remake beats Cyberpunk 2077 because Cyberpunk 2077 is a first-person game, and the Final Fantasy VII Remake so virtuosically demonstrates the palpable joy of being able to see your cool character do cool stuff when you press the button. Or maybe the Final Fantasy VII Remake obliterates Cyberpunk 2077 because its source material never leaned on one thing, long enough for that one thing to fall over. Cyberpunk 2077 sports a cyberpunk aesthetic. If you ask it, why this aesthetic? The answer is, duh, why not? Which I've got to say is actually a strong argument in this exact case.
Don't touch me.
On the other hand, why this aesthetic and not literally any other aesthetic? Why not a new aesthetic? When was the last time we had a truly fresh aesthetic? Dishonored? BioShock Infinite? I mean, I don't like BioShock Infinite, though even I've got to admit that's a neat aesthetic. After so many years of zombie games and games about guys with beards and open world games, or games that are somehow all three at the same time, yet still pretty good, like Days Gone. The Final Fantasy VII Remake's rooting itself in the visual motifs of Final Fantasy VII felt like something generously brand new. It also makes me realize that Final Fantasy 15 is a lot cooler than I usually give it credit for, and I usually give it credit for a lot. If you take the cyberpunk aesthetic away from Cyberpunk 2077, it's still an affecting story. You could make it about wizards and goblins, and it'd still have a striking structure. Actually, now that I think about it, Cyberpunk 2077 is pretty much just Final Fantasy VII. You're a mercenary with a best friend whose chief personality traits are loyalty, stability in their affections, and an unassuming manner.
I'm loyal, stable in my affections. And unassuming.
You accept mercenary missions on the orders of a black man with sunglasses and a strikingly gaudy prosthetic arm. The game's first act climaxes with a dangerous heist in a skyscraper owned by a company with a Japanese name. During said heist, the owner of the world's largest corporation dies, and his son takes over. Someone precious to you dies at a climactic moment, leaving you to inherit their burden. For the last 2/3 of the story, the threat of imminent death lurks, though you can still do side quests and sleep in your bed as many times as you want, and the cataclysm won't conclude. Following the climax of the first act of the story, for the rest of the story, the ghost of a dead man who committed a terrible blazing fire crime, killing many innocent people several years ago, haunts your brain and governs your every move. I mean, Cyberpunk 2077 is not exactly Final Fantasy VII, though it's not exactly not Final Fantasy VII. During a terrorist mission to bomb destroy a building owned by the largest Japanese-named corporation in the world, a plucky, cute-named assistant, voiced by Erica Lindbeck, helps you open a door while bantering with her co-worker about your mental well-being.
Who wrote this manifesto?
Really need me to answer that question?
Jesus, Johnny, you've gone off the deep end.
So what's Soldier Boy's deal?
It's even got Chocobo Sam in it.
Now you had better ready yourself.
Guess wrong, and you'll leave me in peace.
In short, the Final Fantasy VII Remake beats Cyberpunk 2077 because it's got Aerith in it.
Let's keep on trucking.
I like Judy. I like Judy so much I subconsciously made my main character look a lot like Judy before I even knew who Judy was, much less what Judy looked like. That's a powerful notion, and it proves beyond a doubt that I like Judy a lot. I just wouldn't let her kill me. When it comes to Tokimeki Memorial, Cyberpunk 2077 never stood a chance. I knew this going in. In my review, I outlined my case for Tokimeki Memorial as a genuine post-cyberpunk artifact. Tokimeki Memorial pristinely game designs and objectifies human interactions into a work of spiritually moving art. Tokimeki Memorial's random numbers hide bounties of possibility inside enormous oceans of chance. In my review of Tokimeki Memorial, I said that one does not simply just make a game like Tokimeki Memorial. In 1994, Tokimeki Memorial, with its fully voice-acted script, anime cutscenes, and countless hours of story content buried under ant farm-like decision fractals, represented the apex of AAA video game possibilities. It still does today. And it doesn't even have any combat in it. I mean, it doesn't have any combat in it that it isn't purely an on-purpose joke. Cyberpunk 2077 buries whole dating subplots under layers of main story or side quest content. One of the dating subplots happens as a part of the main plot. One of the dating subplots happens at the end of a side quest line that spins off the main plot. One of the dating subplots happens at the end of 2 side quest lines that spin off of the main plot. One of the dating subplots happens after a side quest that feels perfectly naturally random. It occurs to me that CD Projekt Red's games are dating games as much as, if not more than, they are role-playing games. Cyberpunk 2077 is no different. It's a dating game as much as it's a shooting game, a role-playing game, a cyberpunk game, or an open-world game. If you primarily use fast travel, for example, Cyberpunk 2077 is even more of a dating game than it is a game about riding motorcycles, even if you don't use fast travel. So, here at the end of this review, I arrive at my final wish. 20 years ago, during my quarter-life crisis, I wished for a game that had all my favorite violence genres hanging out together under a big cyberpunky science fiction umbrella. Today, all I want is a AAA, full-on, violence-less dating simulation. I've spent the past several months thoroughly investigating every modern open-world video game, extracting thousands of granular measurements. And I've got to say, with confidence, a lot of these big open-world games could completely lose the combat, and I would still have a good time. And I love combat. As I illustrated in my Tokimeki Memorial review, a game without combat from 1994 could draw enthrall a person with expectations as high as mine in 2020. Now, I've played some Mass Effect and some Dragon Age, and I've played all the Assassin's Creeds, and I know all those 18th century French interiors in Assassin's Creed Unity are begging for a full-on combatless family drama game. If anyone, Ubisoft already has the tools to just start making this game, though I'm a little scared they couldn't get 10 minutes into the tutorial with following up press X to eat crumpet with press square to slit the butler's throat. CD Projekt Red, this is what you should make. Just make a Jane Austen game, or I don't know, make a Downton Abbey game. It doesn't even have to be Downton Abbey brand Downton Abbey. Just rip Downton Abbey off. Let me play as someone like Lady Mary. Give me one sister whom I hate, who hates me, and one sister who loves both of us for reasons neither of us will ever understand. Every day, I choose how to ask my lady's maid to do my hair, or what to eat from the breakfast buffet, and I choose to go riding around the state, or to read books, or to go to the village with my sisters, or to write letters if it's raining. My choices build up my stats. Once per week, my parents host a dinner party. Imagine all that candlelight, carpeted floors, silverware, fine china, ray tracing. Maybe one of my suitors comes to dinner. Maybe 2 of my suitors come to the same dinner, despite my only inviting one of them. Maybe my dad invited the other. Maybe scandalous events occur in the night. Maybe it's different every time I start a new save. Look, if you've looked at the internet at any time during the past year, you know people love Animal Crossing. You know people really, truly do not mind playing a game where, quote unquote, nothing happens. I mean, it's not nothing happening, it's everything happening. You know what I mean. I know for a fact that 20 years from now, developers will still be making open world games where you can run over pedestrians and then get chased around by the police. As surely as I know that the police never caught me once in Cyberpunk 2077, as surely as I know that I never committed a pedestrian hit and run, nor any other non-cop killing crime on purpose even once in my hundreds of hours with Cyberpunk 2077. You know why? Because the story is good, and I genuinely care about the relationships between the characters. Grand Theft Auto 3 came out 20 years ago. Grand Theft Auto 1 came out 24 years ago. We gasped at struck pedestrians or shot cops back then. Today, it's worse than boring. It's just plain normal. The trick ain't just cheap. It's old. I joked once long ago that Grand Theft Auto games are so ultra-violent because they don't have a hug button. Cyberpunk 2077, on the other hand, features a hug button numerous times. It's already got its foot in the door. Of course, given the attitude of literally every pedestrian in the entire game, when confronted with an unassuming usage of the talk button, it's going to be some work to get the whole body all the way into the door.
How are you?
New around here?
Ooh, yeah.
For a change?
We got a problem? Look, I'm waiting for a friend.
I'll even give you a discount.
Don't touch me.
Out of my sight, you disgust me. Go back to your sewer.
I don't believe I've had the pleasure.
Ooh, yeah.
Aren't you cold? I could warm you up.
Bingo! I have no reason to live.
A gorgeously, luxuriously AAA video game solely about human relationships, yet lacking none of the narrative depth game enthusiasts crave, would be the new violence. Don't you want to invent the new violence? And I got all this from Tokimeki Memorial, which isn't even half as good as Tokimeki Memorial 2. In light of this extreme downward shoryuken with which Tokimeki Memorial pummels Cyberpunk 2077 straight into the Earth's core, I have decided to exercise my once-per-season option to exclude a game from the action button scoreboard. Therefore, I will not rank Cyberpunk 2077. Meanwhile, I have decided to finally place the Final Fantasy VII Remake onto the list,
Let's dance,
in the position above The Last of Us, both because Cyberpunk 2077 helped me better frame my thoughts about the Final Fantasy VII Remake's format's intense versatility, and because The Last of Us Part 2 is much better and much more interesting than The Last of Us Part 1. And no, before anyone asks, I will not review The Last of Us Part 2. Stop asking me to review literally every game I mention either in one of these videos or on Twitter. Because look, for one thing, anything I could say about The Last of Us Part 2, I've also said in my The Last of Us Part 1 review, my Tokimeki Memorial review, my Doom review, my Pac-Man review, and this review right here. In addition to this, it takes me 200 hours of video game playing, 100 hours of research, dozens of hours of outlining, 60 hours of writing, 18 hours of shooting, and 300 hours of editing to make one of these videos. Given my recent experiences with emergency rooms and a jugular vein infection and an endoscopy, colonoscopy, and tonsil biopsy, I'm feeling pretty mortal right about now. And I gotta say, there were a couple times in that hospital when I thought about the list of games I would like to play, or movies I would like to watch, or countries I'd like to visit someday. And I did, in fact, many times think, there's no way I'm gonna ever do most of this stuff. Cannot review every game I play. If I did that, I would literally die. And I don't want to die, even as a joke. So immediately after I click public on this video, I'm going on vacation. I mean, of course, I don't mean I'm going on vacation literally. I would not go on vacation literally. I would not even know what to do on a literal vacation. I'm taking a game vacation. I bought an analog Super NT and an analog Mega SG, and I paid Bob from Retro RGB and some of his friends $800 to make me an HDMI PlayStation with an SD card slot in it. I am done playing huge new games I don't even know if I'm gonna like. I want to play old stuff I know I already like. For the entirety of Action Button Season 1, I've joked about the next video being the first real one, but this time I mean it. Starting with Action Button Season 2, Episode 1, I will finally begin making video reviews of games I know I like. No more messing around. And I know I've made several duplicitous statements during Action Button Season 1. For example, I've said numerous times that the next video would be shorter, only to make it much longer. Promise that every time I made such a statement, I had already finished a rough outline or even a first draft of the next script, and I knew for a fact that I was lying to you. I tricked you twice like that because I personally thought it was really funny. However, I know that tricking someone once is funny. Tricking someone twice is funny to exactly the person doing the tricking, and tricking someone 3 times is tantamount to grotesquerie. So, as a token of honesty, those who know me will know the purity of my intentions to embark upon Action Button Reviews' true mission by what I am about to say. At some point during Action Button Season 2, I will review Final Fantasy IV. That's my favorite Final Fantasy game. I could review Final Fantasy IV in my sleep. I could review Final Fantasy IV if I were dead. Death is the ultimate game vacation. I probably haven't concocted any sort of elaborate and punishing, gimmicky structure for Season 2 that will result in my needing another tonsil biopsy. I mean, all I really want to do with Season 2 of Action Button Reviews is prove scientifically that old games absolutely are better at everything modern games try to do than modern games are. And I don't think that's going to be difficult at all. I can already prove that a cast iron pan is better for cooking than a nonstick, or that a double-edged safety razor is better for shaving than any 5-blade disposable cartridge monstrosity thing. So proving that Final Fantasy IV is better than Cyberpunk 2077 and The Last of Us Part 2, that's gonna be easier than cooking soup in an Instant Pot. And I promise I'm gonna do it while talking like this, not while talking however it was I was talking until a few minutes ago. I mean, I won't even do this to my hair in Action Button Season 2. I hate doing this to my hair. I'm gonna get a haircut that looks sorta normal when I wake up, and I'm gonna experiment with some hair products that don't make me feel for the rest of the day like the French toast buffet this morning ran out of forks. Wow, I can't wait to get started replaying a bunch of my absolute favorite video games for Action Button Season 2, because at this point in my life, I know that the best vacation destination for me is somewhere I've already been. However, I now realize I should probably start Action Button Season 2 by going one more place I've never been.
Hello and welcome back to Video Games. I'm Tim Rogers. You are watching the Action Button review of Boku no Natsuyasumi.
And I guess I can't even get started thinking about that until I say, we hold these truths to be self-evident. That video games were created awesome. That I was born stupid. However, I will not die hungry. Video games forever. Action Button. My baby boy is the best, and he's hungrier than all the rest. Why don't you look at my baby? Why don't you look at my baby? Why don't you look at my baby boy? You good? Yeah. Bingo!